Guess what? Another reading from the Science of Mind Daily Guides, or the Science of Mind Magazine Daily Guide, should I say. This is one of those days when it feels good to be inside. It's not really cold per se outside. It's not warm, but it's not really cold, and it's kind of somewhere between, and it's drizzling. So it's the sort of day when I would, in the past, as I've sometimes said before, I like to sit down before a nice warm fire and read a book. Well, we don't have a nice warm fire anymore. We have a gas fire that's only appears at certain times of the year and not very often. So the nearest we get to it is when we, at Christmas, we put on the Yule log thing on the television. So we're not watching television per se. It's, yeah, I'm sure you've all seen it. It's the Yule log and it crackles and so on. And so it might be kind of day just to sit there and watch that and read a book. So anyway, I guess it's nostalgia, bringing back stuff like that, which to me feels good, actually. First quote is from a gentleman by the name of J. Warren Welsh, who's described somewhere as a public figure, a husband, a father of daughters, a liberal, whatever this means, a spoken word anti-poet, and a commentator on social issues. And his first book was called That's Not Poetry. So I did not delve any further into J. Warren Welsh. He said, and this is kind of poetry, but non-poetry, I guess, we dismiss their concern with a well-rehearsed "I'm fine," while searching for strength to inhale one more time. Well, to me, that's kind of rhyming poetry, so I'm not sure what he means without digging further into it as an anti-poet or anti-poetry. Ernest Holmes is kind of more down to earth when he says, believing that life is God in action, we must accept its processes with a firm conviction that in the long run, all things will work together for good. Resistance brings contraction, cooperation brings expansion. And there's an old saying that says, what you resist persists. What you resist persists. And if you look at martial arts, especially as taught in the East, then they teach you to use your opponent's strength. So instead of pushing back at your opponent, you let them come at you and you use their strength. So we don't push back at stuff that's not good, I guess. Anyway, that was from Richer Living, page 296, paragraph 1. And this is what Reverend Kris says. Emotions. We can't live with them. We can't live without. And then she says, well, actually, we have no choice but to live with them, right? When I first got into New Thought, people drilled into my brain that I had to be happy all the time. Oh, that never happened to me. Something goes wrong, just be happy. Need money, just think positive thoughts. Relationship challenges, just don't focus on it. Life falling apart, fake it till you make it. I don't think Ernest Holmes ever taught that. We'll get more back to that in a second. Many people tell me that they only feel that they are truly practicing Science of Mind teachings when they are positive, upbeat, happy, and life is going well. Or they can fake it. Otherwise, they sit at home frantically avoiding emotions and situations, pretending everything's okay while falling apart on the inside. It reminds me of the cartoon dog sitting in the middle of a flaming building, remarking to himself, quote, "This is fine," unquote, with a slightly terrified smile. Reverend Kris goes on to say, to me, this has always been counterintuitive. When things, in fact, are not fine, that is when we have the opportunity to fully lean into our teachings. Emotions happen. Life happens. Things happen to us. We can't control every single thing that shows up on planet Earth and in our awareness. What we can do is decide how to respond, what to focus on, and how to shift our perspective. When life is hard, lean into the messy emotions. Tough situations and challenging relationships, lean into them with a gusto, full gusto of this teaching. You don't always get it right, but you can show up. Okay, so what did we say? Ernest Holmes never said to deny what's going on. In fact, he said to look at what's going on straight in the eye, and then you turn away from it and you hold in your mind what it is you want to happen. So in other words, when you pray, and prayer we're talking about here, whichever way you pray, but in our terms, that will be affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. So he's saying that when you are in prayer, in spiritual mind treatment, you focus directly on what it is that you want, a change situation, whatever it is that you want. But he never ever said, deny what's going on. He never said, deny that you're grieving, deny that your bank account is low. No, he said, look it straight in the eye and then move away from it, and in prayer, declare what it is that you really want to happen. So it's a balance. You know, emotions show up and we have to deal with them. And emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are. They're what happens. You know, if something horrible happens and you are overwhelmed with grief, hey, you're overwhelmed with grief. And you eventually find a way out of it. You do that by working through your grief, and then you focus on what it is that you want to happen. And when things are really messy and you can't handle it yourself, that's when you reach out to other people. That's why we have prayer partners. We have people to whom, kind of like a confessor in a way, but more than that, that we have people to whom we can tell them what's going on in our life, tell them the good stuff and the not so good stuff, and we can ask them to hold in prayer for us what it is that we truly want to happen. So, like, our teaching is not one about denying what's going on in the world, but it is one about being able to turn away from it and claim what you do want. So we don't deny that there's poverty, but when we are in prayer, we move away from it. So life is going on. We admit life is going on. Emotions happen. We're feeling rough. We're feeling horrible at times. But we do take time in our spiritual time to move away from it and to pray for what it is that we do want. So I don't know if that makes it any easier or any better. You know, life really is messy at times, and we just have to admit it. And maybe this is what her affirmation means when she says, when life is hard, I lean into the mess and the challenges while staying grounded in spiritual truth. So I admit what's going on, and then I take the time to turn away from it and claim what I do want. But we don't pretend that we're not having the emotions that we're having. I mean, that would be spiritual malpractice if we said to somebody, oh, I've heard this said, but I've never heard it said to me directly, but I've heard it said, and I've heard it quoted as being said in the past, that something horrible happened to somebody, and they would say to them, oh, how did you bring that upon yourself? In other words, you must have had all these horrible thoughts and feelings, and therefore you brought all this horrible stuff on yourself. Well, that's spiritual malpractice. It may be true that when people hold negative thoughts and emotions long enough, that they do attract crud into their lives. But you never, ever accuse somebody of doing that. That is true spiritual malpractice. No, you ask them how you can help them. Right? And when things are happening to you that you feel are beyond your ability to hold in mind what you do want, yes, you reach out to a practitioner or a minister. Ministers are still practitioners. They've just trained beyond that and in other things. Or you reach out, and a practitioner does not have to be somebody who's got RSCP after their name. RSCP is a licensed religious science practitioner. It means that they've been through special training, they've passed tests, and they've spent at least 4 years of combined study in order to get to that point. So, but you don't have to be. Anyone who practices spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer, is a practitioner. And licensed practitioners are simply people who've been trained to do that for themselves and for other people. So there we are. I hope I'm not preaching. I hope I'm just giving observations on this. And I'm still going to research what he means by being an anti-poet. It's kind of intrigued me because I don't know. It seems to me that he was doing a bit of poetry at the beginning. When life is hard, I lean into the mess and challenges while staying grounded in spiritual truth. The Quakers have got a saying which I think is really good. That is, pray and move your feet. In other words, when you pray, in whichever way you do it, it's still part of your job to look for what's coming down the pike and take advantage of the good stuff that's coming down. So sometimes it just happens, but other times you've got to acknowledge and look at the situations and take advantage of them for your own good. So, Reverend Lisa, we'll be here tomorrow, 9:15-ish. I'll be back around about 5 tomorrow, and I can't think of anything other to say than this. You know, life on this planet has got its ups and downs. But when you do spiritual mind treatment, or when you have a spiritual practice, and that could be meditation, quiet time, breathing, and focusing on positive for at least part of the day, that when you do this for long enough, as I've mentioned before, the highs in your life get higher, but also the lows get higher. And you take a different view of what's going on. And you know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So until tomorrow, namaste.